Well, welcome everybody to one of the 2020 C.A.R.B Hall of Fame inductions. And we have got Dixie Kaster here with us. And Dixie, I know that having similar feelings about it, as you do, I'm sure that it's quite an honor to be inducted into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame.
It certainly is. I'm honored. I'm so proud that they would think that I would be qualified for this honor.
Well, tell me about it. I feel the same way.
I know you do. Congratulations.
Well,
to
thank
you.
you. I keep thinking, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, really?
What did I do?
What did I do? Yeah, exactly. But, you know, your husband's legacy lives on in racing in the Kansas City area with all the stories. I mean, it seems like every other week or two at some juncture in racing, somebody mentions Larry Kaster of what he did or where he worked at or things like that. And his reputation, of course, was just really good in the racing community. I think, well, I may have been talking to Carl, and I think, summed it up pretty well. I think a lot of people thought, well, he was pretty tough, but he was fair.
He was.
And
he was. And he loved racing. He loved it.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to be like that. I mean, you got to enforce the rules, but man, you got to be fair about it too.
Right.
But anyway, we're here, Dixie, to talk about you, girl.
Okay, we'll try this.
First off, maybe we should start. Well, let me ask you this: did you get involved in racing before you met Larry, or did this all take place after you and Larry got married?
This all took place afterwards.
Okay.
After we left the little town in Iowa, Centerville, excuse me.
That's okay.
And we came to Kansas City looking for work. And this was in 1957. And he got a job, and we'd been to a few of the races up in Iowa when we were dating. But after we got down here, why, we heard about Lakeside Speedway, and so having the two boys at that time, we decided we'd go out to the races.
Yeah.
And we went out there at Lakeside, and we fell in love with it. And I think it was Joan Ellis is the one that asked Larry if he would learn to score.
Okay.
And and he did. And then they asked him to announce. And then Mr. Mushnick asked him to write and print a program, and he did. So this just kind of evolved from working there at the track.
Yeah, that's how it all got started. Was just going out there to the races just to start with, and then
loved it.
And then how did he make the connection with the people that were running it to actually get involved in it?
Just being in the stands, and we were there every week, and having the children and his interest in it. He'd ask questions, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Gee, what a story. It's kind of similar to mine, but we won't go into that right now.
Well, you can do that on your interview.
I'll do it on my interview.
Okay.
But where did you and Larry meet? How did that all take place first? Let's start there.
Oh, goodness. Well, it's a small town in Iowa, Centerville, and I was working in a velvet freeze.
Okay.
And he would come in. He lived in a little town, Moravia, and about 15 minutes away. And he'd come. The Moravia boys had come to Centerville and run around. And he'd come and he'd buy an ice cream cone from me, and then he'd walk away. And I didn't know he didn't like soft ice cream, and he'd throw it away. And this went on for a while, and I didn't know, you know, he was trying to meet me or anything. And we were at a place that was called, it was a hamburger joint where the kids hung out. And he came in there one night, and I had my folks' car. And some of the Centerville girls knew some of the Moravia boys. I didn't, but they said, well, let's go for a ride in the new car, because that was my folks' new car. And I said, okay. So they said, well, who do you want to ride with you? And I said, get the curly-headed one.
Okay.
And he did, they did, and he came, and that's how I met him, and we started dating after that. So we were high school sweethearts.
Oh, okay. In different towns?
Well, he was in my town an awful lot.
um, when we think about men racing, it's kind of a different thing, I think, than what it is when we have women involved in racing. I mean, even nowadays, in fact, just this year, we had 2 points champions at 2 different tracks that were women.
That's right.
And it kind of shows how the face of racing is changing. But tell me, what did you think about having the little ones around with 3 boys and having to be able to have the time to get involved in what you needed to do at the track? Was that kind of hard to handle for you?
No. They loved racing as much as we did. They wanted to be there. They wanted to do anything they could to help, and they did. They did a lot of things. Mm. But no, there was no problem at all with the kids. And in that day and age, everyone had their kids around.
Yeah.
They were just there, and you expected them to be there.
Right. Well, I know you were just telling me a story a while ago and showing me a program there from Lakeside. And, of course, me being a printer also, why I was quite interested in that, to know that you had hand-set type.
That's right.
Which I had to do in high school, and it was kind of an art. And
it was.
I think I was telling Carl when I talked to him on the phone, ask her if she remembers it being upside down and backwards.
Well, the one yes, I had that, and it was upside down and backwards. And then we had also a lot of hand setting.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I had to do, a lot of hand setting in high school.
Well, and then I had a machine that I could use too.
Linotype?
Linotype.
Uh-huh.
That I could use, yeah.
Well, that probably taught you typing. Were you taking typing in high school?
I took typing in high school, and I was good.
Yeah, well, I look back on that now with computers.
Oh, okay.
And I think, gosh, I wish I'd taken typing in high school. But there just weren't too many boys that had girls' typing classes.
I know it.
It was all pretty much women that were in it.
I know it.
Yeah. But you and Larry printed the program for Lakeside.
We did it for Lakeside. Mr. Mushtig had asked us to. We did it for Lakeside. Olympic approached him, and so without letting Lakeside know what he was doing, he printed Olympics for Jack over there, and then he printed Riverside's.
Uh-huh.
So we had all 3 tracks, and we were doing their programs for them.
Yeah.
Now, most of it, the only stories that Larry wrote were the ones for Lakeside, but the other tracks would write their own, and I'd set the type, and then they'd go from there.
Yeah. Well, this probably kept you guys pretty busy. I mean, was this kind of, did you make a living off of this type stuff, or this was just stuff that you were doing on the side?
Just stuff we were doing on the side.
Man, like I said, it had to take a lot of time. I know I did some stuff for church work for a while, volunteer.
Yeah.
It started out like an hour a day or something like that, a couple hours, and ended up I was up for 3 days by the time I was done.
Well, it wasn't hard for us. We were workers, and we still are. We still work. The family, you work in this family. And so we did other things too. I was president of the PTA. I was active in school things.
Yeah.
Larry was scout master for the kids when they were in scouts. So they were not neglected. We would just build our life around their life around ours, and our life around theirs.
Right, absolutely. That's the way it should be. Sometimes it gets a little forgotten nowadays, but that's the way to do it. Can you kind of run us through what a weekend was like for the Kasters? I mean, if you were Lakeside on Friday, what happened? I mean, how did that all transpire? I mean, did Larry get off work and you had to get everybody together and get things ready to go, and then you'd head out to Lakeside, and kind of run us through what would happen?
We'd grab the programs and head out to Lakeside, get the kids, have the cooler, have some snacks. We'd work, sell the programs. He would do the scoring if he was scorer that night, or announcing if he was announcer that night. When it was over with, we'd leave. We'd go back home. He'd write the stories. I'd get the finishes done, and then get up Saturday morning and do our things that we needed to do around the house.
Around the house, yeah.
And get the program ready for that night, and we'd go over to Riverside on Saturday night, and we'd go to Olympic on Sunday night.
Yeah, yeah. Were there any favorite places you'd like to stop and eat at on the way to the track? Or was it track food?
No. There is one place that we did like to eat after when we were promoting Riverside, was called the Wyandotte Cafe. And it was on State Avenue out there around 77th and State Avenue.
Uh-huh.
A greasy spoon, but they were open all night long, and they served breakfast all the time. So we'd have all the people that worked for us that wanted to come. We'd all gather up, the family and their friends.
Uh-huh.
We'd go out there and we'd eat breakfast on Sunday morning.
Okay. We might mention, since we've got the three boys here,
Yeah.
Carl, Buzz, and Vaughn.
That's
I
right.
remember. I haven't met Vaughn very much, but he looks like he fits right in here.
He does, and he's Larry Vaughn Jr.
Okay.
Larry's middle name was Vaughn.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And then he's got a son, and he's Larry Vaughn the Third, and Larry Vaughn the Third has a son that's Larry Vaughn the Fourth.
Well, hey, I got one of those.
Have you really?
I got, yeah. Michael.
Good for you.
Michael the Fourth was just born. In fact, I think he was just a year old in December. So we've
Hey,
got,
our life is parallel kind of that.
yes, yes, yes. And one of the stories they were talking about was selling the programs. And for how much did a program sell for?
Quarter.
A quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to sell how many to make how much?
They got paid a nickel a program, and when they got to sell 100, then they got a dime a program.
Oh, wow. That's big money, man.
To them it was. Hey, back then a quarter was a quarter. Back in the 60s and 70s.
There again, you were active in several clubs. I mean, you helped Larry score. Didn't you learn to score later on?
Well, Clyde and Joanne Ellis was doing IMCA scoring. And they had Larry and I learn how to do this, and we would go with them to the IMCA tracks, Des Moines,
Yeah.
Sedalia sometimes,
Mhm.
just around, and we would score. But that was, you had a paper, you had a card, and there was a clock. And every time your car went by, you put down the time.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
The time?
Uh-huh. What
Why?
that clock said. That was to keep your car had to show up every lap.
Uh-huh.
So you had to have the time every lap.
My golly.
And that way, then that's the way they got their finish, and that way
Yeah.
they knew which cars were going across.
Okay. Well, did they go down into seconds? I mean, was it like 12:21.20
Well,
or?
yeah, it was, but it was like 10:22,
Yeah.
10:23, 10:24.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Like
yeah,
that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But get back to what I started to say. You were active in several clubs and even organized some. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah, we had over at Riverside. I started the Kitty Club, and it was a kids club, and it was and we had lots of kids sign up for it, and we'd have contests for them, and each week we would draw one name,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be the trophy boy or trophy girl at that time.
Okay.
And but before that, when we first started promoting Riverside, we had I organized what they were called Riverside Race Stoppers, and they were young girls,
Uh-huh.
and with modest uniforms,
Uh-huh.
and they were all dressed alike, and they would do things around the track for us.
Okay.
And then we started the kids club, and a lot of times we'd have a contest, a coloring contest, different things, for them
right.
to do each week.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to make it into a family track, and that's what it turned into being.
Right. Yeah. Well, I remember that. Like I say, we were talking about 65. Like I told you, we'd been married 3 years
Uh-huh.
by that time, and I remember we used to take the kids over. The only thing we used to worry about was them falling through the stand.
Oh, I know, that was everybody's concern.
And the other thing was the chicken wire mesh.
Yeah, that's right.
It might have saved a couple of lives.
Well, I know you were there then, if you remember those things. You definitely were there.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun. Like Riverside
Mm-hmm.
was just in a class by itself, and Lakeside was too, as far as that
Yeah.
goes. I mean, each had their own presence,
That's
and
right.
but the racing was distinctive with each one also.
That's right.
But just fun to go to, and of course, I remember when Larry was promoting there, it was just a fun time to go to.
Thank you.
Lot of stuff to enjoy.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, Dixie, what did your side, your family, your side of the family think about you involved in racing? I mean, this was back in the 60s and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And did any of them ever say anything to you about that? Of course, let me give you one of my things.
I know what you're hitting at.
We used to think Charlie was a little crazy.
You're right. I know.
Because he used to ride down into the pasture and bring up the cows on a motorcycle.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
But what did they think about you being involved in racing?
Well, I'll tell you what. Back in those days, people looked on racers like you, and I hate to say this because it's real stereotyping,
Yeah.
but like carnival people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And they kind of looked down on you.
Uh-huh.
And my folks, my family, they love racing.
Okay.
We now have a Kaster night at I-35 once a year. And I mean to tell you, those Casters can't wait to show up there. Really, we have such a big family, and they come from all over.
I was going to say, I have seen
Have you seen
videos
them?
videos of the bunch. Yes.
Yes.
Quite a
Yes.
crowd.
They wouldn't miss it for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you about involved in the officiating with Larry and traveling around. Do you have any idea of how many states you went to and where they were?
No, there weren't that many states. IMCA was not widely done at that time.
Okay.
It was mostly Iowa.
Okay.
They'd come down at Sedalia, I think, and it was Sedalia and maybe Warrensburg and put on some specials, but that was it.
Okay.
Joan Ellis is the one that could really tell you more about that, because Clyde and Joan were more in charge of that.
Uh-huh.
And we kind of worked under their supervision, and we went with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Were you have a personal moment that you recall? I know there has to be a lot of really good memories about traveling around and doing this. And is there one thing that stands out?
I'll tell you what, there's a few things that stand out.
Okay,
but
give us it.
It was at Lakeside that we met Terry and Claudia Bivens,
Uh-huh.
and they became our best friends. And we traveled around with Terry while he was racing. Those were some of our best times,
Yes.
racing.
Yeah.
And our kids was with us, and and they loved Terry, and that's the reason Buzz has number 54, because Terry was 53 and he couldn't take that,
Yeah.
so he took 54.
54, just one better.
So 50, that's right. 54 gave us, that's kind of our lucky number
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
But Terry and Claudia are real good friends, and they still are.
yeah. I've got a story I've got to run by you that I just
Okay.
heard recently, and I'm
Go
sure
right
you'll
ahead.
know if this is true.
I'll tell you.
I heard one time that there was a little altercation between Terry Bivens and Super Joe Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was just about ready to go to fisticuffs.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry stepped in
Mm-hmm.
and got them both, the story was told to me, got them both to get in the car with him. And he started driving around the track. And he told them, he said, "Hey guys, you two are what people come to this track to see." And he said, "If you guys are arguing and fighting," he said, "it makes kind of a bad image for the track." And he said, "Before either one of you get out of this car, we're going to settle this." Now, is that a true story?
I don't know what was said. I wasn't there. I wasn't there. But the gist of the instance of what you're saying is true.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
But I don't know what was said, because I wasn't there and he didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Larry didn't tell me.
I can't remember who it was, but they were pretty clear about it.
But, yeah. But people did. They'd go to Lakeside just to see Joe beat Terry or Terry beat Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were out at I-70, same way.
Yeah.
Same way.
Yeah.
Terry Bivens is a competitor.
Oh, yeah.
Always will be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that guy.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
do too.
Um, if you knew somebody that was thinking about getting into the racing game or scene, whatever, however you
Mm-hmm.
want to describe it, what would be your advice to them? Save your money?
Well, no. To me, and it always has been this, racing is a hobby. If you fish, you get a boat, you get all this stuff that costs.
Uh-huh.
If you golf, every time you go to golf, you got to pay fees, and
Uh-huh.
things. Every hobby is going to cost. It's up to you to determine how much you're going to spend.
Mm-hmm.
So, a race is a race. Whether it's a car going 10 miles an hour or a car going 110 miles an hour, it's a race.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I just say, do what you want to do, but don't lose your head and spend more money than what you can afford.
Yeah, absolutely. Race to your budget.
That's right. Race to your budget.
Yeah.
That's why the street stocks were so popular when Larry started those. Was because most people, their budget would allow them to have a race car and they could say they were a racer, and they were.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he went from about 10 street stocks that one year he started them to over 100 when the season was over with.
Right. Of course, going along with that, the thing that I remember was when he brought the IMCA modifieds.
The IMCA.
And there again, I can remember there were just a couple of cars to start with. And it seemed like before that thing got over there at Riverside, there were B mains.
Yeah.
And whatever.
That's right.
And how should we say it? I mean, for the Kansas City area, it kind of revolutionized. Between the street stocks and the modifieds, it just changed the whole racing scene.
Yes, it did.
In this area.
It did. Well, being from Iowa, and IMCA is from Iowa, originated there, he had met Keith Knack
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and we used to go to IMCA races just to watch. So when he made the contact with Keith, and they had never gone out of the state of Iowa, and he convinced him that yes,
Mm-hmm.
you could be supported
Right.
out of the state of Iowa, then it worked out okay.
Yeah. I think Carl told me that you guys actually, over the years, only owned 2 cars, if I remember right. One of them was an IMCA modified that Larry bought to bring
That's
to the
right.
Kansas City area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one, was that a street stock car?
Street stock that I think Ed Young from Riverside, Red X.
Yeah. And Buzz drove both of them.
Well, yes, when we got the street stock from Ed Young, and we built it the way it should be built economically, the rumor started getting back to Larry that Buzz was going with him and helping him show it at different places.
Uh-huh.
That Buzz was going to be driving that. They said, "Oh, Buzz is going to drive that." And Larry said, "Oh, he is? Well, okay." That's how that started.
Oh,
He
really?
started driving that street. He had already told everybody he was going to. We knew nothing at all about it. Wasn't really in the plans.
Yeah, he knew, but nobody else did.
He knew it. But it worked out okay.
Yeah.
We all had fun.
Yeah. Is there any kind of a story that you can just remember off the top of your head about Riverside that would just be entertaining for us to hear? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. It's not one of my questions, but I just thought there might be something, an incident or something that happened there at Riverside. If you don't have
Well.
one, that's okay. We can move on.
Sure
I'm sure there are.
Shall I tell him the one about Thurman?
Oh yeah, do that.
Thurman Lovejoy. We just loved him and Tanya. But Thurman drank a lot, and in the pits, and the rule was no drinking in the pits.
Uh-huh.
And we knew Thurman was drinking in the pits.
Uh,
So at the drivers' meeting one night, Larry said, "There'll be no drinking in the pits except for Thurman." And Thurman just stood there grinning at him. Thurman found out that way that Larry already knew he'd been doing it.
Yeah.
That's just one of them. That's one of them.
Oh, that's good. I love it.
Hmm. And then the Gene Claxton rule.
Oh, gee. Yeah.
That Gene, great driver, my goodness. He could really race, and he had a natural talent. When he was at Lakeside or at Riverside, he just had natural talent, and he was winning every week. And people started coming to Larry complaining about Gene Kaster.
Mm-hmm.
He's cheating. We checked the car. We check it every week, and there was nothing illegal about that car.
Uh-huh.
And so finally, he had a meeting with his employees and said, "We're going to do something about this. We're going to make the new rule is that the first and second place finishes of one week has to qualify for the feature for the next week, but they go to the back."
Uh-huh.
And the first night they did that, Gene Claxton won it from coming from the back, and the crowd was standing on their feet.
Yeah.
And nobody ever said anything again about Gene Claxton cheating in that car.
I was there for many of those. It was.
Were you?
Oh, I tell you, I couldn't do anything but laugh, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
because
It was good times.
You thought it was going to punish him so bad,
Yeah.
and then he'd just work his way right back up through there.
He was good. He
Yeah.
was a natural. He still is.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
still
What
is.
was it? We just had him on our show here the other day. I think he got his 32nd points championship.
Yes, I congratulated him.
32nd points championship at
That's
Valley
so great.
Speedway in the big
Yes.
mods. But gee, quite a time.
Mhm.
You know, over the years, and I know you can't remember everybody, Dixie, because there's been so many.
Oh,
But you guys can't do this by yourself.
mm.
It just don't happen. But I know there's got to be a number of people that have helped you and Larry and yourself to accomplish all that you guys have accomplished over the years. Could you think of a few of them and tell us? Like I say, I know it's probably be this long, but anyone in particular, I guess. You mentioned Joan and Clyde. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
you guys had a good relationship with them.
Oh, absolutely. And all of the newer members of C.A.R.B, what'd I say? The oldest members of C.A.R.B,
Uh-huh.
all of them were our friends.
Mhm.
And
Frank Baker.
but the Baker family
Mm-hmm.
at Riverside with Frank and Pat Baker and their whole family.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Remember? With their tow trucks and their willingness to do everything, they would come over, they would hammer boards, they would paint,
Uh-huh.
they would just do anything in the world for us, and they were some of our best friends,
Uh-huh.
and they still are, those that are remaining.
Right, right.
And but that Baker family was really the biggest help to us when we had Riverside.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
couldn't ask for any better help.
Yeah. Like I say, I know there's been a ton of them, and I kind of,
There have been, but that family is the one family that really
yeah.
stands out.
Did or did not Frank go on to race? Some of them went on to race, didn't they? Or
Oh,
was it
yeah,
just
but-
Frank.
Frank, well, when we were having Riverside, all of Frank's kids, I think, had a race car.
Oh, okay.
And but it was just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Frank Baker might have driven in the
Freestyle.
street stocks, and
Yeah.
I think Johnny did, and Jimmy, and
Hmm.
Frankie did. There was just
Maxwell.
the Maxwells, yeah, they helped
Yeah.
us. And just a lot of them.
Montgomery's
Montgomerys,
Yeah.
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 We just,
One of the things I almost forgot, and I've got to ask you about this.
Uh-oh.
Whose idea was it that came up with the figure eight? Because I mean, sometimes that was just so crazy.
well, I tell you what, I believe that years ago they had a figure eight, and then Riverside let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And then we heard about it again, and Larry saw it, and he said, it's a perfect track for it.
Uh-huh.
And there was some of our drivers and some of our fans wanting us to do that. So he said, we'll try it. And it worked out great.
Yeah.
Last race of the evening,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
everybody stayed for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun.
Lots of times, a lot of the guys from the stock cars or pure stocks or whatever they were called then would drop in there. They weren't quite as aggressive as some of
No.
them, but
No.
they didn't want to hurt their cars. But it's just so much
That's
fun
right.
because it seemed like that infield of that track would just be so muddy and whatever, and they'd just go blasting through there, and the mud was flying
Oh, yeah.
in the air, and it was just all crazy.
the dirtier you got, the better the race was, I think.
Well, Dixie, is there any one thing that you want to tell us anything about or anything? I mean, I'm at the end of my questions here, and I don't know if there's anything you want to add to the story. Like I say, the Kaster name is just synonymous with racing here in Kansas City, and I'm sure will continue to be for a number of years on into the future.
Well, Mike, there's really not much more for me to say. Larry didn't think he was as good as he was. He didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
He knew he was doing a good job, but he didn't know how good it was and how much he affected people.
All right.
And I still have people come up to me and tell me what a great guy he was.
Yeah.
And maybe he wasn't one particular race night, but then they'd get it straightened out, and then he'd be a good guy again.
A good guy again. Yeah.
But we loved. We worked together from the time we were married. Like I said, he was a printer, I was the typesetter.
Mm-hmm.
He ran the racetrack, I took care of the office, the ticket sales, and the help. And so we worked side by side for years, all of our married life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I miss him, but I've got the 3 boys that really take good care of me.
Yeah. Well, here's my thing, Dixie. Behind every good man, there's a good woman.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I believe that. But let me congratulate you again on being inducted into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame.
Thank you, and congratulations to you, too.
Well, thank you, dear. I appreciate that.
Good interview.
All right. Thank you.